Good afternoon, and thank you, Assemblyman Shivakula. The Assemblyman does not speak of himself as he should. A number of years ago, the Assemblyman prodded me and pulled me in all directions to come and take a trip to visit Eden. And really, I knew very, very little, and he knew so very, very much, and has been such a stalwart supporter of this great organization and cause. As Assemblyman Shivakula mentioned, I have the privilege to serve as chairman of the Assembly Financial Institutions and Insurance Committee. Before serving in that capacity, I was one of a number of members of the General Assembly to have the privilege to sponsor a number of bills directed at the issue of autism, which all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. More to the point, and most recently, and I see representatives from some of the insurance companies here, as well as our autism family. Most recently, about 5.5 months ago, my committee held a hearing on the issue of whether or not both the intent and letter of those great pieces of legislation, which were signed by, at that time, Governor Corzine, have been endorsed by both sides of the aisle and have been gathered also by Governor Christie as well. Whether or not the intent of those bills has in fact been taken. There were some significant questions which were raised by members of the New Jersey family who were affected and are affected by autism, who believed that indeed the bills were not being fulfilled. As a result of that hearing, my colleagues and I on the committee threw out the gauntlet, if you will, both to the autism community on the one hand and the insurers on the other, and instructed them to sit down, to speak to each other, and to work out the problem. As I've said on so many times, as Assemblyman Shivakula will tell you, I've oftentimes said to colleagues and friends in business and industry that either you make a decision for us and guide us in the proper direction, or the legislature will, and I assure you, you'd prefer if the legislature doesn't act in such a capacity. The bottom line is I'm pleased to report to you that number one, the autism community has developed a multi-page brief, if you will, on so many of the very issues which were addressed in the legislation, which according to their perspectives have not been fulfilled. I'm pleased to report that on September 16th, just a few days from today, there will be a meeting of the insurers joined with the autism community to begin an in-depth discussion in terms of how to ensure that those pieces of legislation are fulfilled, number one, to make recommendations on other legislative intent and initiatives that will better propel New Jersey as one of the leaders, if not the leader, in terms of autism. I'm so very honored to be a part of an 80-member General Assembly. You had the privilege to hear from our speaker just a few minutes ago. You heard from a minority leader as well. It is not coming from Assembly Democrats. It is not coming from Assembly Republicans. It is coming from members of the New Jersey community who join with you, first and foremost, in standing together to work together to find solutions, to support groups like Eden, first and foremost, for the tremendous initiatives and work that they do. There is so much to be done, but it can only be done if we stand together. It can only be done if we commit and recommit ourselves each and every day to getting it done. Thank you so very, very much for the privilege to be here today.